And one of the reasons our sort of slogan is like cybersecurity superintelligence is that really, if you unhobble them, as they say, if you give it enough context about your organization, they will know more than any one member of your team. And so you can treat it like an oracle that has access to all of this context. It has access to your GitHub, vulnerability management, your standards and policies, what your board said 3 months ago, if you're in a public company, the public filings, anything available on the web, all at your fingertips to answer your one query, and do so faster and at a much larger scale. And so without context, the AI models, I think, can be pretty useless. With context, they're beyond human level in their performance. And so that's really the key concept, I think, to get, is that you can go further than you would with a human because you can have so much information in the system. And that's really where they become the most excellent that they can be.
This is the Secure CyberConnect podcast with Jay Adamson and Warren Atkinson, where we're joined by information cybersecurity technology professionals who share their journeys, unique perspectives, and offer advice and guidance. Topics on this episode will be AI, cybersecurity, real use cases, the hypes and myths, and what's broken. We're thrilled to be joined today by John Daley and Jack Miller. John is CEO of HelmGuard AI, a former Palantir executive who spent 8 years across a variety of roles across the US and EMEA regions. John's helped grow the company from a mid-stage private organisation into an S&P 500 and was involved in many of their largest transactions within the security space across both public and private sectors. His expertise focused on deploying and delivering enterprise-scale software engagements. Based in London, John's founded HelmGuard to bridge those capabilities and challenges that he's seen in his work within cybersecurity and AI at Palantir, and to bring a new frontier application to the market. Jack is CTO of HelmGuard and is an AI engineer and researcher with expertise in developing robust and secure AI systems. He's collaborated on research across Europe's leading academic institutions, ETH Zürich, University of Cambridge, University of Oxford. He's also a graduate of Australian National University, where he was the recipient of Australia's most prestigious undergraduate and technical scholarship. He's also published leading journals within AI research, and prior to founding HelmGuard, developed a commercialized algorithm in the quantum chemistry sector. John, Jack, welcome to the Secure CyberConnect podcast today, and thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us on.
Thanks so much.
So very quickly, to kick things off, brief high-level overview from you guys, maybe on some of the key themes that we'll be exploring in our discussion. John, if you want to take the lead on this one.
Yeah, sure. I think there are two that I would start off with. The first is that we've really seen two phases of AI applications, not only in security, but more broadly. The first phase was really just implementing workflows that people do today with vastly reduced time and cost. That's great. There's lots of value there. We think the much more interesting area where we're seeing increasing attention capability now is doing things that were fundamentally not possible or not economically or practically feasible for people to do, and what sorts of new workflows and outcomes that opens up. And that's really where we're focused in our research and development. I think the second theme is how we see the cyber market with sort of two main sides. One is the product side. That's a $90 billion market a year, lots of great vendors, but quite fragmented. Then you have the services side. Actually, the largest the largest cyber company in the world by revenue is actually Accenture. They do about $15 billion a year in cybersecurity services revenue. And we think that is really where there's a lot of underexplored terrain for really valuable applications of AI. And I think the intersection of those two trends is where we spend a lot of time thinking and working at our company.
Absolutely. Well, we're just looking forward to getting into it in more detail. Just a classic sort of icebreaker for our podcast. Usually we ask both our guests is maybe something you're either proud or excited about that isn't typically on the dreaded LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, sure. Happy to start with that. I guess in a former life when I was a teenager, I was a sprint kayaker and competed domestically and internationally for Canada. Was great fun. Was in much better shape back then. But yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, and then mine, I think I'm the only member of the company that isn't somehow like an excellent sports person. The thing you won't see on my LinkedIn is I was a big music theory nerd during high school. I got really into it. I actually ended up coming first in my state in high school for like music theory, which was a bit odd. And today I still come into the office sometimes with a random fun fact about a sort of a musical number or some song that I subject the team to.
Emphasis on random. For sure.
Yeah, I got plenty of facts about Cat Stevens if anybody wants to know.
I'm sure it helps broaden the horizons.
I can relate. We can relate, Jack. I tend to have a mind for trivia. I can name a Oscar-winning actor from a supporting role in the 50s, but send me to the shops for 5 items, I'll come back with 4.
Yeah, exactly.
And look, to both of you again, could you maybe describe a significant challenge, incident or challenge that you both faced in your career that typically shaped your views on security? Maybe John first.
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned in your intro, I spent 8 years at Palantir, and while there I worked on a large-scale government cyber project for about 5 years. It had a lot of ups and downs. That's probably an entire separate podcast. But in terms of technical delivery, the commercial dynamic, the customer relationship, really tested both the team and me personally in a lot of ways, and learned an enormous amount that has informed how we are approaching the problem space and the way we're building the company today.
And Jack, if you could maybe shine a light on your situations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think one interesting thing for me, so before starting HelmGuard, I was mainly doing AI research. And what this taught me was like, I think a few different things. So one is kind of what it's like to try and discover something new. And I think in cybersecurity, if you think about it from the offensive side, in a sense, a lot of what they're doing is a bit like doing research in sort of AI or any other field. And so when I was going through sort of that experience of trying to publish papers, trying to get people to read and sort of use what I had produced, you really got a sense of what does the kind of pipeline look like of trying to find research ideas, sort of come up with a program that would demonstrate them and then publish them. I think it's a sort of similar mechanism for attackers, actually, when they're trying to find vulnerabilities. They have some thesis, they need to spend some time sort of validating that thesis, and then instead of publishing it to the world, I mean, if you're, maybe you publish it as a CVE, but if you're sort of, somebody that wants to exploit it, you don't publish it, you use it yourself. And so when I was doing that research sort of last year and before that, so the AI models were just getting good enough to actually help automate a lot of that work. And so what I was realizing at the time was in research specifically, a lot of work was getting automated. You could send out a lot of AI agents, have them research things for you, come up with hypotheses and do various implementation. So when I was looking at that, I thought where we're getting to is to find novel, research in my case, but in cybersecurity exploits, what you really need is just a high volume of compute. You need to test out a lot of ideas. You need to see whether they work empirically, and then you catalog them and use them for later. And so that really informed the way I thought about the offense-defense balance in cybersecurity with AI, in the same way that I think research is becoming a compute game. Who has the most compute to try out the ideas? I think cybersecurity from the offensive perspective is also becoming a compute game, as is defense, where if you have more compute to run your AI agents, you're going to win. You're going to be able to find the stuff, you're going to be exploit the stuff, you're going to be able to test it out. And so that's really informed the way in which we think about our role at HelmGuard, and that role being providing defenders with the ability to use their computational resources to defend against the computational resources on the outside. And we'll go into that a little bit, I'm sure, a bit later in the podcast. But that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but kind of how I think my experience in research relates to the way I think about HelmGuard as a company and cybersecurity in general.
No, it's really fascinating stuff. Yeah. And look, everyone's talking about Gemini and ChatGPT. But what's one thing that most cybersecurity professionals are completely missing about AI's true capabilities? John, if you wouldn't mind sharing your perspective on that first instance.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is an educational topic that we're spending a lot of our time on right now with security professionals across a range of industries. Because when we meet folks, it's often the case that they have experimented with chat, whether it be Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, and found that the workflows they're trying to implement just haven't worked. The results aren't good enough. They don't actually make a meaningful impact on the workflow. But our view is that that's not really about the model capabilities, but rather about orchestration, tool calls, scaffolding, sort of things you put around the model to execute different workflows. And that's really what we spend our time building, thinking about how you can deploy those in a really flexible way so that ad hoc workflows or structured workflows can be done at an expert level with the speed and scalable compute capacity of AI. That's the first thing I'd say. The second misconception, returning to an earlier theme, is this idea of going beyond just chatbots, right? Chat is a great way to interact with these models, but we really are pushing and working with our customers and prospects to think about what is becoming newly possible in this world where you have scalable compute, right? You can spin up 1,000 agents who have deep context about your organization and expert level intelligence. What can you now do that wasn't meaningful before or possible before? And I think that's a really exciting area.
And Jack, are there any misconceptions that you want to sort of shine light on?
Yeah, I think I think the main misconception is, as John was saying, was viewing AI in terms of the chatbot sort of paradigm that we have. And we've seen people move more and more towards AI agents as a medium by which to get work done. But I really think the key misconception, and it's a sort of a valid one, because up until about 6 months ago, this wasn't possible. But the key misconception is not giving enough sort of to the models to allow them to do their work, to sort of maintain a sort of chat interface perspective of going back and forth with the AI. Whereas today, what you can do is you can send out, as John was saying, many, many copies of an AI agent to go try something and then come back to you. So you can sort of switch into a more asynchronous way of working. And one of the things we use AI for at HelmGuard is you can just send an email to our AI agent. It will go and think about it for 10 minutes and then respond back. And you can do this asynchronously. You can send, the 10 emails you just got to Helm, and it will respond to you. And so I think that different way of interacting, where you can just send something off, see what it says, see what it does, and then come back and choose the best response, or just do it asynchronously while you're doing something else. That is now possible. And I think that's a real unlock for people in the way that they interact with AI.
That's really fascinating and exciting. And look, we speak with a lot of leaders and organizations, some of which have dived in 2 feet when it comes to AI adoption, some more often than not really hesitant. So, John, could you share your perspective in the first instance, followed by yourself, Jack? Now, John, if you could erase the industry's current understanding of AI and cybersecurity and start from scratch, what would you teach them first?
Yeah, great question. Probably picking up on that point that Jack just made, context is king, right? What the AI models lack is not ability, but really the system around it to provide the right context at the right time. And the way we've architected our platform and where we see other tools providing a lot of value is ensuring that you're pairing this incredible computational and reasoning capacity that's very general of the models with your organization's specific context. And now that sounds easy in principle, but really architecting that in a way that is scalable and delivers that context at the right time is where we think the big opportunity is. And with that in mind, I challenge a lot of our prospects and folks we're talking to be asking the question when they're evaluating a tool like ours or other AI capabilities being kind of bolted on to existing platforms. The question, how is this enabling better, more secure decisions? Because I think that makes concrete what is the tangible difference that I'm making in my enterprise because of this AI tool. And if your answer is, I don't know, or none, then what value is it providing, right? And we, like, the challenge we make to ourselves and we commit to our customers is we're going to enable you to make better, more secure decisions across your enterprise to the extent you are relying on our tool and marrying up that compute capacity with your specific context.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one little point to add on there is to make those decisions, to actually have an AI system that allows you to take some path that you wouldn't otherwise do. That requires the context of the business and the creation of that scaffold. And so to me, you can ask Claude, whatever question you have, but really where you see the sort of gains coming in is when you're halfway through a chat and you've provided it with enough context about how your business operates, what you're trying to achieve, so on and so forth. Now that is available through a platform if you spend time to sort of construct that in the first place. And so suddenly you can have all of that context available to you and really translate the sort of queries that you're asking these AI agents into something where they always have access to all of your organization's context, right? Obviously through the appropriate sort of security model. But you can imagine these AIs, if you give them the right memory, the right tools to access what they need, they can be super intelligent. And one of the reasons our sort of slogan is like cybersecurity super intelligence is that really, if you unhobble them, as they say, if you give it enough context about your organization, they will know more than any one member of your team. And so you can treat it like an oracle that has access to all of this context. It has access to your GitHub, vulnerability management, your standards and policies, what your board said 3 months ago, if you're in a public company, the public filings, anything available on the web, all at your fingertips to answer your one query, and do so faster and at a much larger scale. And so without context, the AI models, I think, can be pretty useless. With context, they're beyond human level in their performance. And so that's really the key concept, I think, to get, is that you can go further than you would with a human because you can have so much information in the system. And that's really where they become the most excellent that they can be.
Following on from what we've just been talking about, we know AI and automation is clearly and rightfully going to have a huge impact on workforce, workflow systems in just about every organization out there. If there was one task in cybersecurity, and I guess more contentiously maybe role or roles that used to typically take days or take a lot of manpower, that's going to obviously now going forward take minutes, sometimes seconds with AI. Where do you see the biggest impact being?
Yeah, great question. And I think there's two parts to it. First, where can you see that radical acceleration and expansion of what's possible? Speaking to the customers we're working with in industries like healthcare, industrials, financial services, an area where they continue to spend a lot, both on tooling and people, is third-party risk. And there are a lot of tools out there who can help you gather information, send out and receive questionnaires, things like this. But the thing that's scarce in that workflow is the application of subject matter expertise to a particular supplier and the time it takes to really do a deep analysis of that. And we think AI makes that scarce thing abundant by allowing you to have agents that have access to your enterprise context, have access to your entire supply network, and can go deeper than any individual can to the fourth, fifth, sixth party, and can do continuous tailored assessments of every supplier for criticality and risk at a much deeper level than you could before. Well, it would have been theoretically possible to do this with people. It was not economically feasible because it just took so much time. But you can scale that contextual intelligence now. And so that opens up a totally new way to think about how you should be managing third-party risk. But we think it doesn't make the folks working in that space redundant. It amplifies what they can do, right? Because I think the biggest problem in TPRM is, so what, right? You get all these questionnaires back. What do you do with them? What decision is your enterprise making differently because of these questions. And again, if that answer is none, or I don't know, what value are you getting from that program? Well, we think with the depth and breadth of what agents can do, you can really now run that program in a way that is directly impacting enterprise decisions. Better, more secure, faster.
And in terms of maybe another example of security workflow that might not have been possible until AI, is there any other examples that you feel that maybe impacted for good or for bad?
Yeah. Well, maybe one within that workflow that I just briefly mentioned is dynamic nth party search. So we're working at the moment with a public healthcare organization who has significant third-party risk security issues. And the first thing we did for them was basically apply our agent search infrastructure to do a search out to the fifth level. So their third parties, who are their suppliers and their suppliers. And what we identified was a bunch of shared fourth and fifth parties across their supplier network that they weren't even aware of, but in fact drove a huge amount of their enterprise risk because they had no visibility, but were actually highly concentrated on that fourth or fifth party. And so what can you then do, right? You can begin to feed that into your business continuity and disaster recovery plan. You can begin to do dynamic operational resilience, risk modeling and simulation. And that's just something that, again, maybe theoretically possible, but not economically feasible, now can be delivered for tens of dollars, right? And you can do it every day at a level that was not previously possible with years of work previously. So I think that's a really exciting application.
I think so. And I think, that goes into sort of phase two, as we were talking about at the start of the podcast, sort of phase two of AI adoption, where at phase one, you start to bring in AI agents to help automate a lot of the work that sort of humans are doing today. Then in phase two, what it enables are new workflows, where the human is sitting, orchestrating the AI agents to get further value. So the way I see third-party risk in a lot of organizations is sort of, in a sense, for third parties specifically, they're below the security poverty line. They need to spend resources to try and get at some semblance of their third-party risks. But there's just so many suppliers that a lot of organizations have. Maybe they barely know even the names of these suppliers, right? We've been in situations where we've received spreadsheets just with the names of the suppliers, possibly misspelled, often misspelled without the sort of without any additional context, right? And so these organizations spend the limited resources they have in third-party risk management on just getting a sense of who their third parties are and maybe doing some sort of risk assessment. With sort of the use of AI, these people can be transformed from, instead of spending all of their time reviewing these third parties, that is done by for example, HelmGuard AI agents, and then they can spend their time, as John was saying, on the so what question. How does this influence our business continuity planning? How should this influence our procurement? What controls can we put in place in order to solve this question? So one of the reasons I think third party is so interesting is there's this sort of activation energy that you have to overcome to actually start doing things in third party risk instead of just going through the motions. And I think AI is going to allow so many organizations to overcome that activation energy and start to actually do things in third party risk. Whereas before, they knew they needed to do it, but ultimately what they were doing was just sort of, in a sense, a box ticking exercise. AI enables the human on top to sort of have that intelligence, have that context to then go a step further and answer the so what question in third party risk and in other situations.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, guys, and clearly game changer, but certainly takes away the daunting prospect of a lot of these, obviously these projects. So yeah, amazing. Thanks for sharing.
And you mentioned obviously financial services earlier in the podcast. Share with us a little bit more. What you're seeing right now. Evidence that, of course, AI isn't just hype, and it's an urgent necessity for organisations, because we've seen the FS space certainly lead the way in other areas, in more traditional routes, of course.
Yeah. So one of the areas where we're seeing a ton of value right now is actually in investment firms, where they have a unique version of third-party risk, which is their portfolio, right? So it's not their supplier network. It's we're either looking to invest in or acquire or manage an entity that we own. They often have central teams that are responsible for portfolio operations, including security. How do you do that at scale in an effective way that actually is contextual and intelligent and automated? Well, that's a great application of AI, and really it relies on bringing to bear all of those same capabilities that we were just talking about, but orienting them at those investment assets as opposed to suppliers. And I think that's interesting because it shows the flexibility of the models, but also how that organizational context can be federated down, and you can have both granular assessment at the opco level, for instance, but sharing the portfolio-wide priorities and risk calibration across each of those instances, right? So we're working with one private equity fund now where they have a person on their cyber team, but it's a $70 billion fund. They own dozens and dozens of companies. Well, we're effectively scaling the ability of that individual to look very granularly at each one of those companies on whatever cadence, either predefined or event-driven, makes sense for him. We think there's a bunch of other workflows that look like that in financial services.
And Jack, healthcare, is a highly regulated and sensitive industry. What's happening within that industry? Secure patient data, and of course, critical health infrastructure, without adding to compliance risk.
Yeah, I mean, so I think AI is, as I was saying before, sort of the core thesis of the company is to enable organizations to use their own compute to defend against those actors on the outside that will be using their models in order to, attack these organizations. And so the way I kind of think about things is really in this respect, that the sort of kind of security poverty line, as people talk about it, the amount of money that you need in order to sort of get above that is ever increasing. And you're going to see, as the models get better and better and better, you're going to see sort of the amount of resources you need to defend them go up in the same way. And so the only way in which I think you can sort of get around this problem is to give the defenders the same tools, the same AI models that the offensive side is using. And typically the defensive side actually has more resources, right? So I think this is particularly true in healthcare, where you have such sensitive data, but often you're in a position where resources are quite limited, right? And so the way that I see AI helping there is to secure the sort of this healthcare data from the rising level of attacks that we're seeing on the outside. I know that the NHS recently was under sort of experienced this attack in their third parties, and I believe it actually was sort of proven to lead to patient deaths. And so that's an example of an organization, as we all know, the NHS is very sort of limited in their resources, and where I think it's like critical that we get AI into the organization so that they can continue to stay above the security poverty line. And when I was first getting into security, people talked about this topic, the security poverty line. And my thought was, okay, these are sort of mid-cap businesses, maybe not in sort of critical areas of society. But that's not true. I mean, really, organizations like the NHS, utilities providers, things that make our world run, they are the ones that are going to be below this line as the AI models get better and better and better. And so I think it's imperative. I think it's like a mandate to get AI into these places so that we can secure what is kind of our most important institutions and our most important data, for example, healthcare data. So yeah, I think it's necessary. It's imperative that we get AI into these places so that they can keep up with the outside world.
I certainly agree with you. Appreciate you sharing. And John, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was on a webinar last week with the head of cybersecurity for the NHS, where he was talking about how they have a new security charter for suppliers being introduced. And it's driven by a few things. One is structural, which is that the NHS has outsourced a lot of core capabilities for flexibility and cost purposes. The second is that it has actually improved its internal cyber posture quite a bit through a lot of investment. But the third is that by policy, they don't pay ransoms, but a lot of their suppliers do. And so actually they've found that by increasing their own security, they've just pushed the kind of locus of risk out to their 88,000 suppliers, right? And that's a huge number. And I think a good example of how it's just not really possible to staff a set of team at a particular trust or even nationally who could begin to really think about what's going on with this set of suppliers. And that's an amazing application of AI that we're thinking of, not just at that institution, but more broadly. It's one of those critical sectors where the number and intensity of risks is only moving in one direction, and bringing AI to bear effectively for defensive purposes is a huge and critical priority.
I appreciate sharing. Secure Cyber Connect community have got an urgent announcement. We're excited to share that Secure Cyber Connect podcast is hitting the road. In partnership with some of the leading cyber and tech events in Europe, we're recording a series of exclusive pre-event special edition episodes featuring speakers, innovators, and leaders driving real change in the industry.
And that's not all. We'll be on site hosting live interviews with senior security and technology leaders, and speaking directly with attendees to capture their insights and voices. So this is your chance to not just watch the conversation, but to be part of it. We'll be covering the Cyber Leaders Summit in Belgium, an invite-only forum for senior security decision makers, the International Cyber Expo at Olympia, a global stage for cutting-edge solutions and serious discussion, and DTX London, where technology, innovation, and cybersecurity all converge.
So if you're attending, step up, show up, and be heard. If not, now it's time to register and join us. You can find more information in the description below.
Let's move the conversation forward together.
For all of us at Secure Cyber Connect, we look forward to seeing you there.
And another very important area, of course, we know is operational technology, and an industry or sector that has a huge amount of legacy systems. And I think we'll probably see more of a radical change in how AI can deliver value beyond the traditional security tools it's been used to. Maybe real-time threat detection, predictive maintenance, dynamic risk management, things we've touched on already. What do you think are some of the most pressing cybersecurity headaches that you're hearing about from industrial and critical infrastructure leaders, especially in OT and IoT heavy environments? Either of you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the central problem with OT from the get-go has always been observability and understanding of the environment. I think, it's hard enough knowing what you have on your cloud. Doing that for operational technology is sort of, in some sense, an insurmountable problem. It's extremely difficult. And we've seen sort of traditional tooling that sits on the network and is able to, see what traffic is going through. But ultimately, kind of like third-party risk, as we were saying before, the real issue here is a volume one. You have so many devices, and we've obviously, in operational technology, there's been the policy of sort of security by, obscurity, I suppose, not having the various devices on the network, so you can't even see them in the first place. And so I think where AI is able to help in this particular situation and overcome these pain points is in dealing with that volume of data that we're seeing, and then using the additional sort of reasoning capacities of the models on top of that. So that's sort of where I see the opportunity, and really the kind of challenge in operational technology is the fact that the volumes are so high, and it's fundamentally quite difficult to understand what is going on. Imagine a cybersecurity professional sort of in a nuclear technology, area, right? How do you, it's hard enough, right? Like in cloud to know what to do, to know what's important, to know what's not important. In a nuclear facility, how do you know which operational technology is important? What is what should I protect? What do I even have on the ground, right? And I think that's where sort of the general capabilities of models could be pretty interesting, where, if you talk to an AI, it actually knows a surprising amount about nuclear technology. And so can act as an oracle that helps you contextualize sort of various aspects of cybersecurity. Now that can occur in sort of traditional IT cybersecurity, but in operational technology, I think it's even more important, where the models can help understand, well, this is a piece of technology in a windmill, so on and so forth, or it's in a nuclear facility, or it's on the side of a highway. And you can kind of bring to bear that contextual understanding of various pieces of technology throughout the world. And you don't need to have, a subject matter expert in nuclear technology helping you out. You can have an AI model. Now, I'd check it with the nuclear expert, but that's, I think, a good example of where, the key sort of challenge in OT, and then the way in which I think AI can help with that.
Yeah, I think those very diverse environments, it's a fair point. John, anything you want to briefly add to that at all?
We've talked to a lot of organizations who have varying degrees of convergence between their IT and OT environments. So the one thing I might add is there's a lot of benefits to converging in terms of observability and sort of a unified approach across your network, but it also opens up new sorts of threats and attack vectors. And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword there. And continuing to push out the frontier of what AI can do defensively there is going to be a big and growing area of need in the next couple of years for sure.
And Jack, was there a single moment when you realised that the cybersecurity landscape wasn't actually ready for how far AI could really go?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I think is true is that AI has actually been used in cybersecurity. Sort of more traditional machine learning has been used in cybersecurity for quite a while, right? And I actually think the sort of cybersecurity industry has been a great leader in some of these more sort of traditional algorithms. For example, like linear models, various sort of tree-based methods for detection, especially on the SOC side. I think it's been, actually quite a leader in that side for a very long time. Where I think we've been sort of somewhat behind, and part of the thesis of the company is more on the services side. So the cybersecurity services side, like any other aspect of services, has been a bit behind in what the models can do and in the understanding of sort of where they've gotten to. As we were saying before, in terms of the sort of misconceptions around chatbots, I think that's especially true on the services side, and where AI agents can really help sort of move into this new paradigm. And so the first time I kind of realized that current cybersecurity tooling and the sort of cybersecurity industry was not in the right mindset for this new wave, I think I was at Black Hat last year, and just looking around and seeing what people were describing as AI. Now, it was sort of traditional AI, machine learning, but not in this sort of modern conception that everybody thinks about AI today. And so it was in that realization that when a vendor says they're using AI, often, I think it's changed a bit this year, but often it would be these sort of traditional techniques and not the sort of AI that I was researching when I was doing that before starting the company. So that was really, that was a sort of moment for me. I was like, oh, well, a linear probe is AI, but it's not what I would consider to be AI.
I appreciate you sharing. And John, you left your previous role. You've obviously teamed up with Jack. You decided to obviously build HelmGuard. What other things weren't being addressed and ultimately solved?
Yeah, so I think there's a technical answer to that, and there's a personal answer. I think the technical answer is that, Palantir is a big, successful company. We were about 4,000 people when I left, very forward-leaning on AI. But even there, I found that given the pace of improvement in the models and what could be done, it was very hard to be right at that boundary of like, what's the most kind of new thing that can really reimagine what can be done in a particular vertical. And that's the sort of environment where a startup can really succeed and do something interesting. I think on the personal side, I've got a friend who just recently took his company public after about a 12-year journey. And very early on, I spoke to him and said, I'm thinking about doing this. And he said, you should apply a framework of regret, minimization, which is if you're looking back in 50 or 60 years, like what are you going to regret not having done? And to me, at this moment in time, when there's a technology sort of disjunction, where there's something fundamentally new that you can go and build in an area of big need, cybersecurity, that was just something that I think I would have regretted not jumping at.
Certainly something that resonates. And from your perspective, Jack?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think that, yeah, I mean, I was sort of, as I mentioned before, I was doing a bunch of AI research before this, and my views have been very much, informed by the way in which I was seeing sort of the AI models progress. Now, the first time I interacted with an LLM was back when OpenAI released Da Vinci, which was like quite a number of years ago now. And at that time, you tried your best. You would have 100 attempts to try and make it sort of present a coherent poem or a coherent sentence. And then you saw the release of GPT-2, and then GPT-3, and then GPT-4, and you just saw it, improving massively at each step. And the trend was in some sense predictable. You knew that in 3 years, 2 years, there would be a model that could do X, Y, or Z, or at least there was a very high likelihood of. And so I was deciding kind of last year between going off and doing a PhD, which would be a very traditional route, something which my brother did, and so it was always sort of in my mind as a kid. Okay, well, obviously I'm going to go do a PhD. I was sort of looking at how good the AI models were getting, and I was like, well, okay, if I go to the US and do a 5-year PhD, I don't know how much there will be left for me to do after that time. And so to me, I was like, well, I'm either going to do a startup after the PhD, or I'm going to do a startup now. And just looking at how good the models were getting, I thought, my God, I got to go do a startup. And that's just something that continues to motivate me, and I think the company as a whole is just seeing the rapid pace of innovation in AI and saying, God, we need to keep up with that. Even, we're a small scale startup, and we even find it hard to stay up to date with the latest models and what they're doing. And so that to me was like the sort of impetus was like, in some sense, there's a burning fire underneath us that we need to take advantage of this technology. And I was saying before, with places like the NHS, a real imperative to protect these critical institutions. And so that's what motivated me to start the company.
No, I appreciate you sharing, and I'm a strong believer in fortune favouring the brave, and in myself, Jay, and of course some of our colleagues have been following your work. So we're confident in your ongoing success.
Well, that's what we hope.
And it's such a great point you raise, really, in terms of the human ability for academia and the time that it's afforded to it versus where we are now. Yeah. It's highly concerning in some ways, I guess, to try and keep up. And look, let's talk a little bit more about maybe security playbooks, a bit more about what a living security playbook actually looks like, and in terms of how AI keeps evolving in real time. Talk a bit more about that, maybe one of you, and then maybe the other, whoever wants to grab it. If you could maybe walk us through what an intelligent sort of AI-powered tabletop exercise feels.
Yeah, sure. I'll take the first part, and then Jack jump in. I think the living element picks up on something I spoke about a few minutes ago, which is this idea that AI can be monitoring at a rate and a breadth and a depth that's not possible for people to do. So think about your supply chain and that 20 or 88,000 supplier network, where you're trying to understand how are things changing in that set of interactions with my company, my first party, and how do they impact my business continuity and disaster recovery plan? How do they operate my broader operational resilience playbooks? Well, that's the sort of thing where the monitoring part and then the application of that contextual intelligence to say, okay, something with this fourth party that's a shared supplier of these 3 critical suppliers has changed. There's some indication that they just had an incident or their service is down. What does that mean for me? Well, the models can run that analysis and the simulation at a speed and depth of detail that's very, very hard for people to create and can't be be replicated at the pace that the models can. So what that a dynamic process can do is sort of give you an always up-to-date security playbook at a very deep level with various options for, when a certain event arises, well, we've actually gamed that out, and this is what you should go and do immediately. Here are your next two options. Think about the trade-offs in this way. And it really takes the idea of a playbook from, a PDF document that maybe you have a session on once a year or at best once a quarter, to something that's genuinely always up to date based on the best available information about the set of inputs that are relevant to that security issue.
Yeah, and I think what that looks like in practice is I think you can orchestrate it in many different ways, right? I think traditionally you would have sort of either human can look at that output and say, here's the tree of various situations that we've generated that could lead to certain outcomes, right? And we've been doing this, every day, and we can spend a month's worth of thinking time, human thinking time on a particular scenario to really get at what could be the choice points in a particular incident and how would we respond. You can do that with the models. But then from there, you can either have a human that's sort of looking at that and helping drive the sort of the tabletop exercise, or you could have a dynamic experience in which everybody is sort of, say, logged onto a platform and they are given sort of the situation that they're in, and then they themselves help to they interact with this dynamic asset, which is deciding, almost like a sort of video game, what sort of next occurs, right? And there might be some randomness associated with that. There, sort of almost like a Dungeons and Dragons sort of experience where the AI model has gamed out all of the different things that could go wrong. By random chance, maybe something works, something doesn't work, and you can have that as sort of a dynamic experience inside of your application. And so I think that's like a really interesting space to consider, is like, well, we kind of have an AI, acting like a sort of mediator for these kinds of tabletop exercises, and an unbiased human that is not sort of guided by, the areas of security they know best, but is instead sort of this impartial mediator of like, what would happen in this situation? Let me generate a random number to decide. And so, you've actually seen, a bit of a tangent, but you've actually seen in other areas of mediation, for example, AI models outperforming humans as sort of guiding these kinds of exercises. And so I think it could be very interesting for AI models to do tabletop exercises in security as well. But yeah, a bit of a side note, but I think it's pretty interesting.
And looking at the hypes and the myths, and of course, where things are broken, and not just in the industry, but throughout the world. Can we start by either of you sharing one of the most overhyped AI claims within cybersecurity right now, and why leaders should really ignore it?
Yeah, there's a lot of hype out there at the moment, for sure. Probably in cyber specifically, I would be shocked if there was a cyber company out there right now who didn't have an AI offering of some type.
Every single one of them, apparently, John.
Well, apparently, indeed.
I think the reality is that a lot of those will be sort of rebranded traditional ML techniques, which are probably misleading to call AI in the same way that LLM-based generative AI technology is being applied today. So what I would encourage leaders and potential buyers to be asking are two questions. One is like, what's the AI expertise that this company is bringing to bear? And what is their theory of the value that this AI is adding to their use case? Because there is that AI isn't needed for every use case. It might be superfluous or just creating noise for some. But where it is adding value, understand really why, what are the trade-offs, and how deeply is the team building it experienced and seasoned in this particular set of AI techniques.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as John was saying, I think sort of based on his point regarding sort of the use of AI where traditional tools would have worked well, these AI models can be pretty expensive, right? And so one sort of thing to think about is like, is this vendor replacing sort of a core function of their initial tooling with AI, in which case the AI might perform as well or perhaps worse than a traditional tool might. I think a really good example here actually is sort of the linear probes that have been used in detection for quite a while. And one really interesting thing here is that LLMs often have the same kind of biases that humans do. And so one really interesting area here is like humans invented linear regression as a technique in order to find truths about the world. We were thinking about data, we were trying to like reason about it, and we invented sort of statistical techniques like a linear model in order to identify whether something was an anomaly or not, right? And so for anomaly detection, for example, in sort of discovery of incidents or sort of suspicious activity, people use linear probes, and very often they are going to be better than an LLM that is looking at the same data, right? We as humans invented linear probes as a thinking tool that allows us to perform better. And so if you're replacing a linear probe, for example, in certain situations with an LLM, that's actually a poor design choice. And so I think in the hype, people can start to add in LLMs or AI in places where they're not really needed, and where actually a more traditional statistical technique, like a tree-based approach or a linear probe, will actually outperform the LLM and be way cheaper, right? And so I think people are sometimes pressured into using AI in areas where it's not needed and at the wrong sort of layer of the stack. And so that's an area of AI hype that I think comes up a bit, where you're replacing things that don't need to be replaced.
That's fascinating stuff. And John, I know you touched on it sort of a moment ago, but when vendors are saying we're using AI, is there one question that CISOs, VCs, or even boards, for instance, should be asking to separate the BS from innovation? Is there a quick go-to question that could help sort of identify those red flags?
So what decision is this going to help me make differently, and why? If you don't get a good answer to that, then what's the value that's being provided? It's like, enabling operational decision-making. That's the lifeblood of businesses, right? There's a saying that data is the new oil, but I think one of the main lessons I took from my time at Palantir is like, data is an input, decisions drive your business. Decisions drive your organization. If the AI is not enabling decisions, then what is it doing that's creating value for your org?
That's brilliant. Appreciate you sharing. And Jack, is there anything you want to add to that?
On a much more technical note, I would ask them, what are they doing with their evaluations? So I would ask them, what is your eval framework? How does it work? How do you verify that your outcomes are, in fact, the outcomes that you would expect? Are you using human data labeling? What are your environments for your evaluations look like? If they don't have a coherent answer to that question, then they're not doing appropriate evaluations of their agentic systems. I would recommend just like asking, before a vendor meeting, asking Claude, what evaluations would you expect for this AI agent? And if they aren't talking the sort of same language as that output, I would be a bit suspicious of how rigorously they've designed the system.
That was like 10 questions, Jay. He said,
I would say,
question,
okay. What is your eval suite?
Yeah.
What is your eval suite? That would be my question. What is your eval suite?
I think there's a good 1-2 punch there, really, guys. John can come in with the initial hammer blow, and then if they pick themselves up off the floor from that one, then Jack can just finish them off with a more technical. Some good stuff there, guys. So look, and just talking a bit more about other founders that are building AI in let's say within cybersecurity. What's the toughest misconception that you've had to overcome, and maybe how can you advise any new startups to avoid falling into that sort of similar trap?
Yeah, for sure. I think we're at a moment when if you go on LinkedIn or your social network of choice, you're going to read 4 things about how this company just got to 10 million ARR in 72 hours, and this other one got to 100 million in 5 days. And those are great. Those are amazing companies, across them. Very hard to do in cyber, right? Long sales cycles, a lot of scrutiny, trust, brand, references are paramount. And so you need to come in realistic about what it takes to earn and keep trust from potential buyers and the time it's going to take to get there. And that has impact on everything from, your runway, how fast you can grow the team, how much money you've got to raise, how early you need to invest in, trust signals and brand. And I think really being clear-eyed around the unique features of this market is very important for success.
And guys, as we come to the back end of the episode, really, we obviously want to talk a bit more. I know you touched on it earlier in the session, but you talk a bit more about HelmGuard in terms of the vision of your AI, the mission, the purpose, and what the future sort of typically looks like for you guys.
So great question. Cybersecurity superintelligence to us is about empowering and amplifying the impact of people, and we always want to keep that in the foreground. Specifically, that means giving every security professional expert level subject matter expertise, assistance, and deep organizational context in a scalable way. That's the thesis of the platform. And then tactically, we help provide the tool calls and the scaffolding and the agent orchestration that helps assist and accelerate their work. We think sort of putting the people at the center and then figuring out what you need to build around them to make them as effective as possible, to drive those better decisions, which we've been coming back to. That's really the core question of the company and what motivates us.
And Jack, do you want to add anything to that in terms of where you see the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was saying before, the way I view sort of the imperative in cybersecurity today is diffusing AI into as many workflows as possible, so that in the future, when the offensive models are getting better and better and better, we can use those same models, those same capabilities internally to defend against those outside threats. And to me, that's sort of the most important thing to do right now. And so the way I view the HelmGuard platform is the place where in the future, CISOs, third-party risk analysts, eventually everybody in the cybersecurity team send off their AI agents with our technology to go and defend those risks. Now that's the grand scale vision, but we're seeing it today with third-party risk, with framework analysis, with various parts of the platform, where we're getting to the position where if you want to do something, if you want an AI to do something for you in cybersecurity, you log into the HelmGuard platform. You put in the text box, hey, can you analyze all of my third-party risks for me, produce a report for my board, or do X, Y, or Z? You can do that. You can hit send. We orchestrate all the AI agents. We use the compute for you, and we help you defend the organization. It's really the sort of super intelligence, the workbench, where your AI agents defend your institution from the cybersecurity threats of today and the future.
Well, it's certainly an incredibly exciting time for both of you and for HelmGuard AI going forward. It's been an absolute genuine pleasure listening to your journey today and your insights. For people who want to stay connected with you guys beyond LinkedIn, is there anywhere else that you want to sort of maybe guide people to?
Is a great set of resources, videos. We've got a YouTube channel as well that has a few different talks that Jack and I have done about different parts of the platform. And then, if they've got specific questions or interested, John or Jack at HelmGuard.ai, I'll email. We're always available to chat.
Yeah, thanks again for sharing, and we'll try and get those email addresses at the bottom of the screen upon release. And it's been an absolute privilege and fascinating. We've done quite a few episodes on AI over the last 9 months, but I can say without a shadow of a doubt, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of Warren as well, that there was a really, really insightful content in that, and I think our audience will have absolutely loved it without a shadow of a doubt. So can't wait to see how things go for you. We'd like to say a huge thank you. I'm sure the community and all our listeners will want to continue the discussion at some point going forward. And if you want more sustained engagement, as always, we invite you to join the Secure CyberConnect community, where we offer a range of collaborative solutions to tech and security and AI professionals at no cost. As always, expansive community access, mutual mentoring programs, online networking sessions, and exclusive interviews such as this, with panel discussions and masterclasses and live events going forward throughout 2025. Thank you so much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks. Thank you very much.